To me, this region really resembles the story of the Green Bay Packers. Here you have a team, not just in the smallest market in the NFL, the smallest market of professional sports teams in the world. And yet, even still, it's one of the 20th most valuable professional sports teams.
Akeem was phenomenal. We had gotten such great reviews from him. His story is so impactful. We just are so incredibly thankful that Akeem could spend the day with us here in Green Bay.
Oftentimes, we don't realize that success in entrepreneurship is really a spiritual exercise as much as it is a strategic exercise. And when we don't carry the right mindsets, we hit obstacles and we're not resilient.
Akeem's presentation had so much energy, and what he shared by how we can tell our stories, the stories themselves are way more impactful than just the facts and statistics. So I love the conversation with him, and I hope we'll have more in the future.
You have a product or service that could change someone's life, and they never find out about it. Whose fault is that? It's yours. When we go out and tell a story about a product that we make or a service that we offer, all of a sudden we give that opportunity to our customer, to our stakeholders to change their lives. And I think, to me, it's an obligation.
We have a special guest here today, all the way from St. Louis. Akeem Shannon is a story architect, serial entrepreneur, and dynamic speaker who helps businesses and organizations scale through the power of strategic storytelling. As the founder of Flipstick, one of your summit gifts today, it actually landed him with an appearance on Shark Tank. His story of tenacity, his reinvention, and relentless storytelling ties into our summit theme of resilience today. To quote Akeem, "Your business grows when your story flows." Please help me welcome Akeem Shannon to the stage.
Flipstick is the brand. If you already heard about it, raise your hand. It's a kickstand on demand with Flipstick. Gravity is under your command. In summary, I came to Shark Tank for a band, so I could put Flipstick in everybody's hand. Sharks, get a kid a chance. I'll deliver ROI on your 100 grand. My name is Akeem. Hello, Wisconsin! Man, ever since that 70s show, I always want to say hello, Wisconsin on the stage, and here I am. My name is Akeem, as Greg mentioned, and thank you to US Venture for sponsoring this portion of the event. And I am excited to talk to you all today about the power of storytelling. As you just saw, that was me on the set of Shark Tank. But before I get too far into that, I want to take you back to a moment where I was in an interview for a dream job with a little company that some of you guys may know. I won't say it in case they think I'm disparaging them. And as I sat here in this interview, they said, "Hey, Akeem, look, everything sounds great, you seem great, but there's just one problem. We thought that you had a degree in chemical engineering, and it turns out you don't." And I said, "Look, you're right. I don't have my degree. When I went off to school, full scholarship, I lost it. I had to come home and I had to restart. But I made myself a promise that by the time my friends graduate from college, I have to be making at least as much as the average college graduate." And over the next 3 years, not only did I hit that goal, but I saved up nearly 100 grand and was making nearly twice the national average. So if I could do that for me, imagine what I could do for you. And she says, "You know what? I think you could do a lot for us, Mr. Shannon. Why don't you come work for us?" And in that moment, it showed me the power that a story has to change everything. I was the same candidate that walked into the room, and it went from a no to a yes with the power of a story. After I ended my career at Square, I wanted to start a business. I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I learned a lot about sales. I helped a lot of different organizations. And I was in a great mindset when I got this phone call from my uncle, an engineer at NASA, and he tells me about this project he was working on for the Space Launch System, where he was going to use this adhesive that was based off the feet of geckos in order to stick some wiring behind paneling. And Since I had just recently moved, I was like, man, I could have stuck my TV on the wall, saved myself a lot of rental damage in that apartment if I had this special adhesive. And while I never made that TV, the idea for a little product called Flipstick was born. A little device that goes on the back of your phone that allows you to stick it to virtually any flat surface again and again. And while I thought it was going to be a business that let people watch ESPN on their phone and Netflix, that month that we dropped our product, TikTok became the #1 app in the App Store. And all of a sudden, people were using my product to stick their phone on the wall to make short-form content. Now, as this starts to happen, I'm like, okay, I think there's a business here. And when you got a good business idea, you gotta take it to Shark Tank. So I go, I apply, I get past 40,000 people to the final round. They're like, Akeem, we're down to the final 150. We just got to cut a couple more people out. You almost certainly are going to be on the show. This is going to be amazing. It's going to change your life. They said, we're going to call you next week. And they called me, and what do you think they said? You're not going to be on Shark Tank. And I said, what? What do you mean I'm not going to be on Shark Tank? I had no other options. The website wasn't working. We were selling Flipsticks in a kiosk in the mall. But I knew that, hey, I've gotten this far. I was able to come back from an issue in college. I have to figure this out. If I can't have the celebrities on Shark Tank, I got to go somewhere else. So I start traveling around the country. I went to LA to the BET Awards. I went to Atlanta to the Super Bowl. I'm giving away Flipsticks to everyone I could imagine. And eventually I find out about this event called the Revolt Summit. And at this event, they were gonna have a pitch competition. I said, okay, I can win this pitch competition, get about 10 grand from AT&T, it'll all work out. Apparently there's gonna be some rappers there, I can rap, I can win, I can, get this competition going. And so, when I find out that the pitch competition is closed, I said, okay, I can't do the pitch competition, but instead maybe I could win a record deal. I can rap about my business, win the record deal. DJ Khaled's gonna be there. He'll say another one. And then all of a sudden it'll all work out and we'll figure it out from there. So I go, I rap, I get to the top 5. They're like, Akeem, you're gonna be on the stage. DJ Khaled's there. We love that you're rapping about your business. That was until the coordinator pulled me aside and she said, hey Akeem, we're gonna need to disqualify you from the competition. You don't actually want a record deal. You're trying to pitch your business. I said, you got to be kidding me. She disqualifies me from the program, but resiliency for me it's not just another word in the dictionary. It's the name of the game. It doesn't matter when I was in school and I got knocked down, or when I got rejected from Shark Tank and I got knocked down, or when I was sitting there and realizing I invested this money to come to this event and they said you're disqualified for the program. So I sat there in the front row. Right before the event was about to start, they had a comedy show. And while the comedian's on stage, I just stood up. I held that Flipstick in the air. And he looked at me in very colorful language, which I will not use this morning. He says, man, what are you trying to sell me? And I go full pitch mode. Eventually, that comedian lets me on stage. I perform the rap on stage during his comedy set. The crowd goes crazy, and Revolt ends up buying a ton of Flipsticks from me and inviting me to LA. When I get to LA, I knew someone else was gonna be there. None other than D-O-double-G Snoop. And I said, no matter what, I have to get Snoop Dogg to invest in my business. I get to LA. They say, we're not gonna introduce you to Snoop Dogg, Akeem. We're not taking you backstage. We're not gonna give him your product. We're not gonna do anything for you. You're here, we bought your product, be happy. Well, I'm in the crowd. I'm like, I got on stage last time, I can do it again. And as Snoop is taking questions, he was talking about weed, obviously. As Snoop is taking questions, they say, one more question, and I'm one person away. And I'm like, I gotta figure something out. So I do the same thing. I take the phone out my pocket, I stick it to the wall, and Snoop, hi, is looking, looks back and forth, he said, I think that mother lover just stuck his mother loving phone on that wall. And everyone in the crowd is like, man, Snoop's really high today, because what is he talking about? what's happening? He's like, no, y'all didn't see it. He just stuck his mother-loving phone on the wall. Bring me that sticky phone. I go up to the stage. Snoop is like, this man's a genius. Oh, and he's got Snoop Dogg on it. This man's a branding genius. This is the product that's gonna change the world. And from that moment, a producer from Shark Tank hears about the story. And he invites me to come audition for Shark Tank, and we make it directly onto the show. The product didn't change. The company didn't change. The numbers didn't change. What changed? The story changed. Now it was this great story of tenacity and how I was able to build up to this moment. And all of a sudden, I realized, man, with just a story, this opportunity that was blocked, Shark Tank, it opened up to me. And that really changed how I thought about business. And today I'm going to teach you how we at Flipstick and through all of my companies think about storytelling and how each and every one of you can use storytelling throughout your organizations and your lives to scale and grow. Now, this wouldn't be a conference about resiliency if I went on Shark Tank and it all worked out and I got rich, now would it? So we get on Shark Tank. Super Bowl of business. I'm excited. I'm like, man, everything's gonna change. I'm gonna make all this money and one day it's gonna be amazing. And the day it airs, I get an email. They're like, hey, it's 2020, November, Friday after an election. Nobody knows who the president is, and we're delaying Shark Tank by 2 hours. I'm like, God, I don't wanna know who the president is. I just want my episode of Shark Tank to air. And they're like, it's gonna air, it's just gonna be delayed 2 hours. I'm like, okay. Right as the episode gets ready to come on, the newscaster says, hey, if we got any news, if we find out who the president is, we're gonna interrupt Shark Tank and bring you the news. And I was like, for the love of God, I don't even want us to have a president. I don't wanna know. The world doesn't need to know. None of us really need to know. We really just need to watch Shark Tank, right? As luck would have it, no interruptions. It's the last segment of the show. I come on, that rap that you just saw comes on, I got a whole party going. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're on national TV. And right as that rap ends, interrupting your regularly scheduled programming to bring you a message from candidate Joe Biden. And Joe gets up there and he's like, hey folks, I got absolutely nothing to tell you tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. And just like that, the opportunity gone. Here I had done everything I could, went around the country, back and forth. I even convinced Snoop Dogg to help me out. And the opportunity was taken away. But see, I knew something though. I knew that the power of a story could change everything. So I got on my computer, I sent an email to the head showrunner of Shark Tank, and I said, listen, this was unfair. You should do something about this. No one even got to see my episode. This is wrong. And he sent me an email and he said, Akeem, you signed a 900,000 page contract. And on page 8,000, it said that if an act of God happens and we don't air your episode, too damn bad. That being said, we really love your story. And for the first time in the history of Shark Tank, he decided to re-air an episode. Not only did he re-air the episode, he re-aired it on New Year's Day. Viewership was through the roof. And here I was, once again, the power of a story to change the entire trajectory. We went on from that Shark Tank episode to become one of Inc. magazine's top 50 fastest growing consumer product brands. We landed in Target and Best Buy, AT&T and T-Mobile. We raised a ton of money. It was this incredible journey. And each step of the way, I always focused on our story. When we were in meetings with partners and producers and investors, we always focused on story. So I want to talk today about our 34-56 framework. And you guys can take some pictures of this stuff. But I truly believe, and I've even seen the evidence from some of the other speakers today and New North as a whole, that this is something that's happening here in the region. And each and every one of us can use this. So 3456 stands for 3 stories, 4 mindsets, 5 principles, and 6 audiences to excellent storytelling. And we're not gonna go through all of it now. We'll have a session in the afternoon where we dive a little bit deeper, but I'm gonna cover it at a high level today. The first is the types of stories that we tell. And I've told quite a few of them already. One is your start. It doesn't matter how big your organization gets, people always want to know, why is it that you do what you do? Why did you get started? What makes you different? Why did you take the chance? And even if you are not a leader within your organization, why is it that you yourself started in the industry that you're in? Number 2 is your mission. What makes you better than anyone else at the world at what you do? Why should I trust you? What's your unfair advantage that should make my organization come and work with yours? And the most important type of stories that we tell is the stories of our customers. When you share the story of your customers, your stakeholders, it changes the way the person on the other end, your audience, really sees you and who you are. And that's what we'll hit on here in a second. Next, we'll talk about, really quickly, the mindsets. So, I mentioned earlier about starting off with this phone call from my uncle. Now, I didn't tell you, this phone call came at 3 o'clock in the morning, okay? It was a ridiculous phone call. Sometimes my uncle calls me about aliens, and I know he works for NASA, so that can be a little sketchy. But, he calls me about this. He's telling me about this adhesive, and normally it would have gone in one ear and out the other. But in this moment, I was in a great mindset. I read a book called The Alchemist. I don't know if anyone's read that. I just felt like, man, there's opportunity out here. When you're in a great mindset, when you're sharing stories, when you're at an event like this and you're networking, it changes the way people perceive you, the energy that we have around each other. And this comes from 10,000 years of tradition of oral storytelling and the oral tradition that humans have. Next is the principles. There's quite a few here, but there's one that I thought was great earlier that we heard, and it was talking about when you imagine being in the room, and you said it, Oliver, operational efficiency. What I loved about your story, and what to me spoke to me as this what-if moment, was here he is as an organization, and they so much believe in their mission of operational efficiency that even within their own organization, when they've invested money in different platforms and softwares that no longer work, that aren't part of their core competency, they realize the opportunity to shift it to a third party. And if you can walk into a room with a customer and tell them, hey, just as we ensured that we improved our operational efficiency within our own organization, we can do the same for you. Our core competency is manufacturing and design. It's not yours, it's ours. Let us do that for you. It creates this what-if seed within the mind of your audience. Say, man, if that worked for them, how could it work for me? Lastly is audience. We've heard about a lot of different audiences today. Sometimes it's about recruiting, right? Bringing new members into our team. Sometimes it's about speaking to customers. Sometimes it's about how do you speak to the leadership within your own organization to convince them to do something. And even though the stories remain the same, they're always going to be different depending on who your audience is. And when you combine the principles and the stories and the mindsets, you can reach every audience that you need. I like to think of stories as seeds. When we plant seeds in the minds of someone else, what happens? They grow. I'll tell you guys another story. I was at a big conference in Austin, and we were raising money. We had just had our best month ever, and we were about a couple $100,000 from closing out our round. And I was in the audience, once again, you're kind of seeing a habit here. And on stage was Mark Cuban. This is after Shark Tank. I didn't do my deal with Mark. He was sour about it. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be great in a full circle moment if I could land this final couple $100,000 with Mark Cuban? So, in the audience, I'm gonna ask a question. And they say, yeah, sir, what's your question? And I go, hey, yo, Mark. The last time on the set of Shark Tank I saw you a year ago, you told me, and I quote, your sales suck. Ask me what my sales are now. The crowd, ooh, Mark, being the consummate gentleman that he is, says, what are your sales now? I said, last month we made 100 grand. I said, last time you saw me, Mark, we were selling flip sticks at a mall. Ask me where we sell flip sticks now. Crowd's going nuts. I'm like, we're selling at Target nationwide and Best Buy nationwide and AT&T nationwide. Crowd's going crazy. As you can imagine, Mark did not give me that investment. However, a story and a seed had been planted. As I walked out into the conference area, guys from Amazon say, yo, that's the guy who went toe-to-toe with Mark Cuban. They invite me over, the guy's telling the story. He's like, oh, you guys missed it. And then he was like, tell me what my sales are now. And you know, I didn't think too much of the whole ordeal till a couple months later. We get an email, and I find out, hey, we just won a $10,000 grant from Amazon. I said, did we apply for a $10,000 grant from Amazon? He's like, no, it just came. I said, great. I get a text from a friend who works at Amazon. She's in a meeting, and she tells me, Akeem, they're talking about Flipstick in our meeting as part of one of our small Amazon Pay customers. What's going on? I said, I don't know. I get another email a couple months later. They're like, Akeem, we've been hearing your story around the office. We would like to feature your business on Black Friday. I said, I know you lying. We made more money on that Black Friday than the money I would have asked for from Mark Cuban. I tell you this story because here I was creating a moment thinking, hey, maybe it'll land me an investment. But I had planted a seed in the mind of all of those Amazon employees so that when they went back to their offices and told everyone about the conferences they were just at, everyone's like, oh man, look at our Amazon seller out there telling Mark Cuban what it is. They loved it. And I didn't even have to go and share the story myself. It was a story that told itself. You know, I would recommend everyone here, no matter your organization, no matter what you do, to find yourself a story architect. That's something that I get to do today. I travel all around the country. I teach people how they can leverage storytelling. Sometimes they're small businesses, startups. Sometimes they're larger legacy organizations. A lot of times they're sales teams, getting them excited and pumped up. But really understanding how you can take all the different parts of your story and leverage them to grow and scale is critical. And if any of you need help with this, please reach out to me. Come to the afternoon session. We'll be doing a mini version of what I typically do at organizations called Story Shark, which is a workshop where we dive in deep and we extract all of these great stories that you may have so that you can leverage them for your businesses. And in closing, I'll tell you another story of one of the businesses that we helped. We were working with a small business out of Ohio, and they were a supply chain company, business 40 years, and they were really struggling, hadn't landed any major contracts in like 6-7 years. And I said, hey, give me your pitch. What are you doing there in the energy sector? And it was terrible. Like, yeah, we do supply chain. I said, okay, and he's like, well, we do supply chain. And as we dove into the story of the founder, I found out that he was 22 years old. He convinced AT&T to let him start installing safety equipment at all our different facilities. The contract was only worth about $60,000 a year. He turned that $60,000 contract into a $20 million contract over 10 years. He had zero experience when he started. Then he did the same thing at GM, and he did the same thing at Verizon, and he did the same thing at Duke Energy, and then he just stopped doing stuff. And I said, when I asked you what you did, you didn't tell me any of those stories. He's like, well, I didn't think they were relevant. I'm like, what? He's like, those are from 20 years ago. It's like, it doesn't matter. It speaks to who you are. It speaks to your mission. It speaks to your story. And that's what people invest in. We revamped his entire story. He went to an event called $1 Billion Roundtable, companies that spend $1 billion with women and diverse-owned businesses. And he immediately lands an opportunity with IBM. He couldn't believe it. But to me, it was evident. It's like, dude, your story's unbelievable. What large organization wouldn't want to see you grow the same way that those did back then? It doesn't matter the time that's passed. And so for everyone here, if this wasn't clear already, the most important thing that you can do when you leave here is to share your story. When I was hearing Shabokan talk about the housing program that you guys have and bringing in, new young families to stay in the community, that's an incredible story. And it allows us to invest in our organizations so that we can grow them, so that we can make the products and services that ultimately change the world. And it all starts with the great story. And that's my story. Thank you guys so much.
We thank US Venture for their continuing sponsorship of this afternoon's keynote dedicated to entrepreneurship and innovation. By the way, we're here in a place that has so many stories. And you can look up at the walls and you can see the stories of thousands of events that have happened here and Sunday afternoons over the years. And it's so wonderful that we have Akeem to continue to talk about the great stories of his work and the work of others. So if you would please join me in welcoming back for an exciting second half discussion, Akeem Shannon.
Awesome. I'm not gonna rap this time, guys. No. Oh, great. So, I think Tim made a great point about Green Bay, and I was sharing this with Barb at the break. And to me, this region, it really resembles the story of the Green Bay Packers, right? Here you have a team, not just in the smallest market in the NFL, the smallest market of professional sports teams in the world. And yet, even still, it's one of the 20th most valuable professional sports teams in the world, every single league. That's kind of unbelievable. And as we heard the stories from housing projects to all the different organizations and the sponsors, to me, it's like, man, the New North is really punching above its weight. It's really incredible, and I don't think that we could be in a better place that better resembles that other than Lambeau Field. So listen, this afternoon we're gonna keep it casual, but we're gonna go deep. And I think we have, let's see if we have our slides here. I am going to briefly bring back up our details about all of our different principles in the 3456 system, but I actually want to take questions because I want to make sure that I'm hitting on the real insights that people need around these topics. But briefly, I'll just go back over them so you can kind of know where we can go with this. So we got stories, mindsets, principles, and audiences. I told a lot of stories today, but they almost always break across these three categories. And so no matter your organization, no matter what you do, whether you are a startup, whether you are within an established company that's been around for 70 years, you're in recruiting, or you just want to grow your personal brand, there's only a couple type of stories that you need. And typically when I'm doing a workshop with an organization or individual, we'd like to work on about 6 stories, right? If you can have 6 stories that you can just go to and tell based off your audience, you'll be in a very, very good place. We can also talk today, and just real quick, if you think you're gonna have a question, just raise your hand so I can see who may have some questions. Just real quick, you don't have to know it now. We have one person that's gonna raise a question? Okay, all right, I see a couple, all right, great. We'll get into mindsets. I think that oftentimes we don't realize that success in entrepreneurship is really a spiritual exercise as much as it is a strategic exercise. And when we don't carry the right mindsets, we hit obstacles and we're not resilient. We're ready to give up. And I like to think of success and business like a roller coaster. It's not really climbing a mountain of success, but it's, hey, after every peak, you hit a valley. That's almost guaranteed. But the momentum that you have going into the valley is exactly what you need to get to the next peak. And so really understanding how we do that is important to how we tell stories and how we continue to grow. Principles, one that I didn't talk about is movie trailers. And I'd love to get into that. We'll take a couple questions first. But, I mentioned one of my clients who got his deal with IBM. It took him 2.5 hours to relay to me what his business does in their stores. And I'm gonna be honest with you, ain't nobody listening to you for 2.5 hours, okay? It's not gonna happen. but it's how do we take 2.5 hours of content, the ups and the downs and the excitement, and we get it down to 2 minutes. The same way a movie trailer will give you all the emotions of the movie, right in that 90-second, 2-minute time slot, without giving it all away so that you want more. And being able to do that's key to great storytelling. So some of the other pieces. And then, of course, audience. So I think that no matter if you're in sales, if you're an executive trying to grow your personal brand, if you're in recruiting, if you're a nonprofit trying to solicit donations, depending on the audience that you're speaking to ultimately determines how you tell those stories to each one, even if the stories may be the same. So I think we had a couple people that wanted questions, and I'm going to come down here, actually. Sorry, camera guy. All right, let's see. Who had a question over here? Is this check? Oh, well, now you need it. Or who had a question over here? All right, who has a question right here? I'm gonna come back.
Hi, I'm Sadie Howell. I'm with Envision Greater Fond du Lac. So we are a combined Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Corporation. My question is, and it might also apply to the plexuses of the world, how do you tell your story without taking credit for other people's stories? So if we're helping a company start or expand and we need to tell our members and our investors why we matter, but we don't want to take the credit like you do for starting your own company?
That's an excellent question. The truth of the matter is take credit, okay? And I'm gonna tell you why. We had a customer, he bought our product. He was a small social media influencer, a couple thousand followers. We're not talking anybody big. And my marketing director comes to me, he's like, you gotta see this kid. He's selling a ton of flip sticks. You gotta see this kid. He spoke American Sign Language. And most of our people buying our product, they just, are making TikToks, nothing of meaning really. But he was using it because when he wanted to sign, he wanted to have all of his emotion there. So he would get on FaceTime, he would sign, but he needed both hands. So he would get the flip stick and he would take it, he would stick it to the wall, and then he would be able to sign with both hands and get all his emotion. So he's telling his followers, who also speak American Sign Language, hey, you can get this product, you can FaceTime, you can use it, you're gonna love it. And he's just selling flip sticks left and right through our influencer program. We walk into a meeting with Target, and I share that story with her. I'm like, hey, here's this 17-year-old kid, here's how he uses our product. She says to me, that's the exact type of customer we want in Target. So when you share the story of the people that you help and you incorporate it into your own, all of a sudden, whether it's a partner or it's a potential larger customer that you can work with, they're gonna work with you because of the story of your customers and of your stakeholders. So I think it's vitally important that we tell those stories, and we don't own it. We just made one small product. He did everything else, but it was still important for us to share that story in order for us to grow, or for him to grow, and ultimately for our customers to be satisfied with what we brought to the table. So I think you absolutely share those stories, and I wouldn't consider it taking credit for it. Great question. All right, what else we got? I know we got some questions in here. Yeah, come to you.
Where are you from? We were just curious. We were looking to see kind of a little bit more of your background.
Yeah, so I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. Got anybody from St. Louis, Missouri? Ever been to St. Louis, Missouri? He said kinda, sorta. That's not a good sign. That's not a, you said you are? 8 years. Too long. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And, it's funny, when I left, went to school, had to come back because I lost my scholarship. It's kind of this devastating time for me. And I was able to finally build it back up. And when I started my business, and I'm sure some people in here will resonate with this, when I started my business, I felt like, man, no one in this town is helping me do what it is that I'm trying to do. No one wants to support me. They won't put me into their shops. No one wants to invest any money into me. And I think that I fell into this mindset of being at home where it's like, hey, I need to leave in order to be successful. Has anybody ever felt like I need to leave the town that I'm in, my hometown, in order to be successful? A lot of people, right? And what I found is that in any mid-market that you're in, if you're not in a New York or LA, a big international city, the story is actually the same. A lot of our homegrown talent, and I was one of them, felt like, hey, I have to leave in order to be successful for people to take me seriously. And, I'm so glad that I didn't leave my hometown, because even though I traveled around, I got a lot of opportunities, from getting on Shark Tank, and all that stuff came from traveling out. When we were getting ready to actually air, we didn't close our deal with our sharks. When you watch the episode, you'll see I closed the deal. We decided not to go through with it. Can't talk about it, lots of contracts. But when we were getting ready to go on the episode, I didn't have any inventory, had no warehouse, I had nothing, okay? And I had recently won a grant from an economic development corporation, $50,000. I wasn't supposed to get any of that money until 6 months ahead, and it was only gonna be 10 grand, and then the rest was gonna be over the course of a year. And I called them, I said, hey, Shark Tank, I need like 30K so I can get a warehouse, so I can buy inventory, everything. And when I tell you they moved mountains, they had $30,000 in my bank account within 24 hours. And if it wasn't for that Shark Tank episode, we had no product, we had no warehouse. The whole opportunity would have been dead before it ever started. And it was one of those things where I realized, man, the people in my own town, they supported me so much. We raised our money, like they helped us raise money. All the different, when you watch the episodes, you'll see that I did business with a shark, but all of the different deals that we got, all the major retailers, they all came local people. Oh, I know so-and-so, they sell in the Target. I know so-and-so, they do this on QVC. I know so-and-so, he's at Amazon. And it was just all of our hometown folks helping us out. I know that didn't necessarily answer your question, but I just wanted to say that because to me, it's like, man, wherever you're from, the people there want to support you. You just got to get out and find them. All right, what else? What else we got here? Yeah.
How do you help people, we're Wisconsin, so we don't like to brag, to better tell our story? So the mindset piece of not feeling that we're too humble to tell the story so that more people know about the opportunities here.
So I think that's also an excellent question. I think a lot of us, we get taught as kids, like, don't brag, it's good to be humble. But here's how I look at it. If you're changing the world, you have a product or service that could change someone's life, and they never find out about it, whose fault is that? It's yours. You could have something that could literally change someone's life, and if they never find out about it, it did no good to anyone. And so when we go out and tell a story about a product that we make or a service that we offer, all of a sudden we give that opportunity to our customer, to our stakeholders, to potential employees. We get the opportunity to change their lives. And I think, to me, it's an obligation. And so I look at whatever I do as it's my obligation to share this information with the world. To me, it's like, growing up, my grandfather, he was a minister from the South, and he was a minister for 40 years. And it would be like if someone was Christian and they're like, I don't want to brag, so I'm not going to tell anybody about Christ, Jesus, none of it. Let me just keep it to myself. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, right? Not to share that. Or if you're a brilliant, financier like Ray Dalio, and you've helped countries make trillions of dollars, and you said, you know what? I don't want to brag. I'm not going to tell anyone how to manage their money. Like, they don't need that. Countries bringing China out of communism into capitalism? No, I'm not going to do that. We wouldn't think of it that way. So, yeah, I don't think of it as bragging. I think that's important for all of us to realize, like, we have something of value for people. It's not selling them something. We have something that's actually going to make a difference. And so we are obligated to put that difference out into the world. Great question. Cool. What else we got? She said she's got a question now, guys. She got it.
I just wasn't ready so soon. I'm Christine from Plexus, and I think my question's going to be rooted more from the corporate side, which I think many of my peers and colleagues here could relate to. We often try to tell stories around the functional things, the capabilities we have. We want to tell everyone everything, as you said a few moments ago. But as I engage with you, there's an energy, there's an emotional connection, which I think overheroes even the product story that you're talking about here today. So talk us through, like, how do you balance and bring through more of that emotional connection and then let the rest of the story tell itself in different ways?
I love this because I think even when we're small, I don't know, just real quick, raise of hands. Who here has a business that's under $10 million a year, works at a business under $10 million a year? Raise your hand. Okay, and then put those hands. And who here works for a business over $10 million a year? Raise your hand. Okay, perfect. It's about 50-50. And what I found as a small business is I started saying everything is we and us. And big, because I thought big was better. People love big. Now, I worked for some big companies. I was a #1 sales rep, and I won but 2 Fortune 500 companies in the whole country. That was before I started Flipstick. One was Verizon, and one was Sprint. And what I didn't realize then that I learned later on is people don't always like big, they like personal. They want to feel like you know me and my issue, my problem personally, and therefore I will do business with you. One company that's really good at that is Apple. Apple does not talk about the megapixels in the camera. They don't talk about the milliamps in the batteries. They don't talk about all the different types of technologies and patents and trademarks that they do. That's not what they talk about. What they tell you is the story of a grandmother who needs to meet with their brand new grandchild who just happened to move across the world with their daughter in Vietnam, and how do I connect with that person? And so when you watch an ad from Apple, it shows you, hey, this grandmother gets to see face-to-face her brand new grandchild on the other side of the world. And that's why you should buy our product. Not because of the facts and the features and the benefits. They give you a story that's relatable. One of the pieces that I have here, the principles, is what I call the what if. And so for me, when I am, no matter what audience I'm speaking to, I'm always trying to create in their mind is, what if that was me? If I can create that moment within a customer or a potential employee, if I can create that within their mind, even as a large organization, it will always land whatever it is I need to land. It's just to give you a quick example. When we were trying to hire like some of our first senior employees, we're small, we don't have a big budget. It's like, how am I gonna convince these folks to come from real companies with real benefits to my tiny little organization? And the key was telling the story of, hey, here's who I am, here's how I got started, here's what it was like for me when I worked for a little company. When I worked at Square, they just had a couple hundred employees, grew to several thousand. And I told them what happened to me there and what benefit that gave to me and my family and my life being in a small company and growing big. And by telling that story, they immediately say, man, I'm seeing this guy, he convinced Snoop Dogg, he's gotten on Shark Tank, and he did this at this other company, and then now he has this. Well, what if that was me? So that's how I did my recruiting to grow. When I was at a much larger organization and I was doing sales, all I did was share story after story of our customers. That's all I would ever focus on, because I want our future customers to feel like they look just like our current customers. When I was at Square, every coffee shop I talked to, I was like, listen, let me tell you a story. And I would just tell the story of our customers. It didn't matter about the technology. They didn't care about any of that. And it was the most advanced credit card processing technology in the world at the time. Doesn't matter. They wanted that what if moment to say, man, if my business can grow like its other person that helps business, where would I be? What would that look like for my family? What would that look like for my company? I think that makes ultimately the big difference. So yeah, thank you. Come over here. Beth.
Hi, Beth Hudak with House of Hope. A lot of your story is about failure, which I really love. How can we as leaders in our organizations encourage stories of failure that don't make people feel bad and also don't concern our investors?
Okay, so this is a great question. I think that we live in a world today where it's very glossy, it's social media driven, it's all about wins after wins after wins. Let me tell you about our wins. And for me, wins aren't always realistic. We don't always learn from our wins. We learn from our failures. And I find that when people see that we learn and evolve, they buy into it. I wasn't 100% sure about this until I had my first employee lose me $100,000. And the way that happened was we had a shipping issue. It was post-COVID, but still where shipping was very expensive. We missed the deadline. We had to get it to a retailer. We had to spend $100,000 over what we had expected to spend. We made no money off of the shipment. And at first I was furious. I'm like, what am I gonna tell our investors? It's gonna be horrible, it's gonna be terrible. But I gave that employee the room to make that mistake. And when he made that mistake, that operational mistake, he went after that, he felt like, I have to fix this. Over the next 2 months, he went and found us in China, the same company that does about 70% of the overseas delivery for eBay. Found that company, interviewed them, and got them to start warehousing our products, saved us about 60% on our shipping fees internationally. It's unbelievable, unprompted. Now, did I tell the investors that story when we had just lost the $100,000? No. Did I tell them the story after we saved the 60, 70%? Absolutely. I'm a big believer in curated stories. They need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you tell a story in the middle, it doesn't always help people, just to be honest. So I think that sometimes if you reach failure, you have to get to the success, the meat and potatoes of the story at the end before it's actually gonna be a benefit to you sharing. And who knows the story of Abraham Lincoln? What happened to Abraham Lincoln before he became president? Does anyone know that? Do you know that? You wanna share it? Was he just Yeah, so I didn't know this. In my school, they said Abraham Lincoln, greatest president, he just won. That was it. But that's not what happened. She just said he lost a lot of elections. Well, before that, he had a business in Springfield. He was co-founded it with his business partner. Business partner was a smart one, no offense. And when the business partner unexpectedly died, the business goes out of business. It's Abraham Lincoln, terrible businessman. So he says, man, company's out of business. Maybe I should run for election. And that's what he does. He runs for election, he gets into Congress, and then what happens when he gets into Congress? What happens the next year when he runs for re-election?
One term, and then he left.
And then he loses. So then what does he do?
Senator.
He says, you know what? I may not have got re-elected for Congress, I'm gonna run for senator. Now, that's crazy, but he wins. And then when he becomes senator, he says, man, you know what's better than senator? Speaker of the House. And what happens? He doesn't get it. And since he doesn't get Speaker of the House, he says, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna run for president. Saves the entire union. And it wouldn't have happened if he hadn't failed and failed and failed again. This may not even be a country if that man hadn't failed all of those times. But if he just comes out and he says, vote for me, my business just went out of business, that may not have worked out for him. But in retrospect, that story then becomes the powerful unit. It's way more powerful than it was if he just won, because it's real. And I think particularly for young people, I speak to a lot of, younger generations, and I think we live in a time where we see success all the time, we don't we don't see the failure. And so when we fail, we think, what? That's not what was supposed to happen. That's unrealistic. When I'm in school, if I fail, it's all bad. There's nothing to learn. But in reality, everyone's failing. We just don't talk about it. So I think that every time I have a success, I always have to say what failure led me into the next success. I think it's a critical component. Great question. Who's first?
Akeem, clearly you are on fire. You mentioned the spiritual side of all of this, so I was just gonna know what ignites you.
Oh, Karen. Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that. To me, there's a huge spiritual component when it comes to success, business, entrepreneurship. I'll tell you this great. This is nuts. Okay, so I mentioned earlier in the first talk about I was in this great mindset when I got this phone call from my uncle, and I mentioned a book. Does anyone remember the name of the book? The Alchemist. Raise your hand if you read The Alchemist. Who wants to share in 2 sentences what The Alchemist is about? No, you know what? No one ever wants to recap anything. So The Alchemist, for those uninitiated, is about a boy who goes on a journey to find his treasure. He has a dream about it. And early on in this journey, he learns about omens. We call them signs, signs from the universe, signs from God that will guide him along his way. And when I read this, it just resonated with me. I'm like, man, I just quit my job, a really, really great job working for Square. I'm out here on my own. I was doing marketing. I wasn't loving it. And I'm like, man, there's just this opportunity that's out here. And if I just have my mind open to the opportunity, it'll come to me and I'll find it. And when I did that, I get this phone call. And I just was so relentless, and I'm never like that, but I was so relentless that, hey, this opportunity is the one for me, I have to take it. And I think that if I was not in that mindset, opportunity doesn't happen. It ends right there. Who's ever had like an idea and then like a few years later you saw it on TV? And you saw it on the internet, you're like, oh, I thought of that. That would have been me, guaranteed. I'm a big believer that if you have an idea, a whole lot of other people are getting that same frequency you're getting at the same time. So if you don't act, someone else will. That's why when Uber comes out, Lyft comes out, they were both thinking about it. And I found out that all the great opportunities that I had, they were such a chance encounter of me just recognizing there was an opportunity that existed there. That summit that I told you about, Revolt Summit by AT&T, that's a music conference. I had no business going to a music conference, let alone paying $500 for a VIP ticket. No business doing that. I had no money, it was dwindling down, and I did it anyway because there was just a feeling. And I think that for me, I like to meditate. I told you my grandfather was a minister. I like to pray, and I like to really focus in on let me see the opportunity that exists, because if I can see the opportunity, I don't have to work so hard. And that happened to me again and again. I can't tell you the crazy stories of just paying attention. And it's all about how you feel in the moment. If you got anxiety and depression and you're worried about this, that, and the other, you'll miss it, and it'll be right in front of you. And I'll give you guys one other story where that happened. I'm coming to you. When we were early on, we had no budget, and we needed to advertise. We had a Kickstarter campaign. And I reached out to this family called the Onyx family, and all their kids were on YouTube. And they're all young, like all under 12. And they have millions and millions of followers. I'm like, man, if they'll just make a video about Flipstick, it may go viral right away. And so I finally get a hold of them, and their agent, when I looked him up, he was also the agent, no lie, of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And I immediately realized they're going to be very expensive. He sends me a quote. He's like, we'd love to do this. $70,000 for a YouTube video. $70,000. I'd never even heard of these kids, okay? And my mom was trying to convince me at the time to go. I was just starting the business. We hadn't even launched our Kickstarter. Realize this. My mom was trying to convince me to go see my uncle for Easter, the same uncle who I got that phone call from that works at NASA. I'm like, I can't go. I'm working on this new project. I can't tell you about it. I got to work on this. And she's like, oh, just come down for Easter. So I'm looking at the emails from them, and my email program tells me, like the location where my email was open. And to back up a little bit, over the last few days, I kept getting all these signs. I was watching TV, and someone was like, oh yeah, we have a grandma, she just won the contest out of Huntsville. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I was watching a movie, and in the movie, it was a movie about space, and the space shuttle was falling apart, and they're like, Earth to Huntsville, Earth to Huntsville. That never happens. It's always, Houston, we have a problem. I'm like, what's this, janky movie talking about Earth to Huntsville? What's happening here? And then as I look at this email, the email was open in Huntsville. So I send an email back, and I'm like, hey, I'm coming to Huntsville for Easter. The agent doesn't respond. The dad responds. He's like, I'd love to meet you. Let's meet at Starbucks. Turns out, dad's a former minister. We meet at Starbucks, and he says, you know what? I'm gonna make my kids do the video for you for free. A $70,000 sponsorship, free. If I hadn't gone to Huntsville, never would have happened. So I'm a big believer, like your mental state will determine the outcomes. That video, if you look that video up, it has like 3 million views. And that was the very first video anyone ever made about Flipstick. So all about your mindset.
I love your mindset. And one of the things I wanted to ask about is the story you tell yourself and the story you tell to other people before it actually happens. because so many times it's the vision is yours, and now it's your responsibility to make that happen. And many times people are afraid to tell what's on their heart, to tell where they're going, because they feel like they haven't been there yet. But I've heard about people talking it until it's reality, so go ahead and help me with that.
Brian, speaking my language now. You don't let me take you to church, Brian, now. Hold on. So, I'm a big believer in speaking things into existence. I've always done that since I started this business, and let me tell you, it doesn't matter what your religion is, it absolutely works. You will be matched up with the opportunity that you seek every single time. And so I was talking to my grandfather, very wise man, he's 96 now, and I told him I read The Alchemist, and he's like, grandson, if you had read the Bible, it was already in there. I said, well, The Alchemist was more entertaining, Grandpa, so I learned it from The Alchemist, okay? And he tells me, he's like, there's another book you need to read, and it's called Think and Grow Rich. Raise your hand if you read Think and Grow Rich. Oh, we just have a couple. And the reason you haven't read it is because it's 100 years old. I'm like, Grandfather, I'm not reading a book from 100 years ago about business. Like, come on now. But when I read The Alchemist, it was good, but it's, it's fiction, so it's kind of woo-woo type of stuff. And I wasn't feeling good. We had applied to Shark Tank, didn't work. I was kind of down a little bit. And so I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to give this Think and Grow Rich book a try. And the author of Think and Grow Rich, what he did 100 years ago was he went and interviewed titans of industry. And he tried to figure out, how did you do this? And we're talking like household names, Henry Ford, we're talking Morgan Stanley we're talking all of the titans, US Steel, all these guys. He interviewed them and said, how did you do it? And they're like, man, I just thought about it. I said I could do it. And then things started to come together and the opportunities came together where it allowed me to do it. And as I read this book, I'm like, Henry Ford? I'm like, if he had nothing, knew nobody, no education, nothing, builds one of the most iconic American businesses in the history of the world, and all he started with was a vision that, I just think it can work. That's it. I was like, man, I can do this too. I can do it too. As I was trying to create the flip stick originally, I didn't know any manufacturers. I didn't know anything about manufacturing, making, I don't know about patents, none of those things. But I believed that, hey, I can make this happen. I had this phone call, and I had this vision, and I had this idea for this product, and I can just make it happen. And I thought back on a story I had heard about the founder of GoPro. Who knows the story of the founder of GoPro? Nobody. Who knows what a GoPro is? There we go. So the founder of GoPro, not an engineer, not a photographer, a videographer, no tech, nothing. He's a surfer. And he's not a good surfer. He was troubled because he had traveled around the world, lost a whole bunch of surfing competitions, and he had no footage except from the beach, which was miles away from where he was surfing. And so he thought to himself, man, it'd be really great if I could record myself while I was surfing and not destroy the camera. And this is, it's a while back. There's no iPhones and none of that stuff to record. Waterproof iPhones, although they're still not waterproof if you ask some people. And he literally goes to Best Buy, buys a little Sony cam, goes to the acrylic store, gets some acrylic, duct tapes it, puts it in a package, FedExes off to China and says, hey, can you make this, but make it waterproof? $3 billion company. And I said, if he could do that, I can do that. And that's exactly what I did. I made my little prototype out of paper and double-sided tape. I recorded it, didn't even FedEx it because I'm lazy. And I sent it to factories in China, and that's how we found our first factory and made the first version of our product. So I think that if you believe that you can make it happen and you believe in yourself and you follow your vision, man, the sky's the limit. You can make it happen. And that's my time, guys. I got to run. But it was great meeting everybody. And feel free. I'll be here at the network reception, so ask me any other questions you got. Thanks.